Hello and welcome to Coded Quick, the channel where every episode is going to consist of a interview question for a computer science job like software engineer, or maybe a programming competition question, or maybe just a practice little exercise that's going to help us all get better at our programming skills. The idea is that I give the question that I have picked directly before the video, so I don't have a lot of time to prepare. And then I spend some time working on it, and then I go away, little break, come back, and have the solution that I came up with. And of course, down in the comments, please let me know if you've done better than me, and we'll see what we can come up with. Should be a good practice for us all, especially for when that company you've always wanted to work for calls and asks for one of those dreaded technical interviews. So let's hop right into today's question, which is one that I saw on a number of different websites. Looks like my camera's blocking the source of where I got it from, but I got it on Reddit. Given a list of numbers between 0 to 99, print out the missing numbers and number ranges, and it gives an example input and output. 0, 1, 5, 7, 27, 54, blah, blah, blah. And then the output is all of the missing numbers printed in such a format where there's comma separated, just like the input, but the it's shortened. So 2, 3, 4 becomes 2-4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, blah, 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 all the way up to 26 becomes 8-26. And yeah, so this one definitely intrigued me, and a lot of people, I saw it in a couple different places, so thought it was a good one to tackle. Let's get out of here, and I will show you my situation here for the setup and workflow. I have Sublime Text open here on the left, and I'm going to be writing in Python because of its readability and it's so popular. If you have any suggestions or ideas of what languages would be better to use, leave them down below in the comments, and I'll probably add some of the more popular ones into the rotation for languages that I use. But if you know Java or C#, you should be totally fine at reading Python code. It's very brief and easy to read. I have PowerShell. I'm on Windows, so I'm basically going to I just run the Python command and run the code from the command line, and that should be pretty easy to any Python users. And then I have a little notepad for scratch notes, and I've just copied the question in there for now. Okay, so I just got some of my workflow set up a little bit more. I have print hello world in our Python file called episode1.py, and I have come over here, I hit enter, I run the Python command with episode1.py, enter, and it printed out hello world. I know that's kind of small, but that is the output we were expecting. Workflow is all set up. Worth mentioning, I'm using Python 2.7, so there will be some minute syntax changes from if you are using Python 3, but generally it'll be the same. Okay, so I'm going to spend under 3 minutes now just talking about the problem. So we have numbers between 0 and 99, print out the missing numbers and number ranges. Now, if I were to get this in an interview, I would expect the question to say something more like, given a list of numbers, print out the missing numbers and number ranges. That way, it would give me the opportunity to ask some clarifying questions. I think we have pretty much all the information we need right now. We know that numbers are not going to be negative. We know that it's going to be a list of numbers from 0 to 99. Maybe I would clarify that it would be, well, I mean, we have an example input right here that is actually Python syntax, so that we should, as a matter of fact, just sort of for ease, input, wow, can't spell, input 1 maybe, and set that equal to this exact thing, and then we could sort of queue up some other examples. I can't really think of any edge cases, but they might come up later. Yep, that's really all I can think of. Duplicates would be a great question to ask. What if there are duplicate numbers? Or if the numbers are the numbers always going to be in order, in ascending order? I'm going to add some restrictions here for us. Matter of fact, let me knock down the font size of this just a little bit so I can fit a couple more lines in here. I'm going to say no repeated numbers, and numbers, or rather I'll say input list in ascending order. Now, whoops, don't need to save that. Okay, so these two things that I'm pointing out can be easily worked around, and they're not really crucial assumptions to make. If you find a better way, then by all means let me know what you come up with. So that's sort of the conversation I would have with an interviewer or something like that about this particular question. Okay, so this is the part where I just sort of freeform code this thing, and I'm only going to spend a few minutes on it, and this is where we're going to probably make a lot of mistakes. It's going to be really sloppy, but we're only going to spend a few minutes here on camera doing it, and then I'll cut and take a break and come back with the final answer that I come up with. Okay, so first thing I would like to do is obviously find all of the missing numbers. And to do this, the first thing that makes sense to me is to actually just go through all the numbers between 0 and 100. Well, so I guess it would be 0, 99. Now, or 0 and 100, and I'm going to actually print I, save this and run it because I don't remember Python's inclusion or exclusion. So I can see 0 is included and also 99 is included. Great, so let's clear that. I don't think I can make the font bigger on this in my terminal PowerShell window here. So sorry, everything else is probably a readable size. Okay, so we have all those numbers. Now, I'm going to create a list here called missing, Python I believe uses underscores a lot, missing nums, and it will be a list. So, for I in range of 100, if, now I can't remember exactly if there's a call to contains or not. So we could do a second loop to figure out if it's in there, or chances are if you're in an interview you could ask if there is a method to do that, and probably it would be fine to make the assumption there is one. I know that if you were doing this in Java and you were going to use an array list, there would be. So it's, yeah. But anyways, if input 1, we'll start by that. I'm trying to think of the best way to test multiple. We'll just modify that. So let's just save input nums is what we're going to call that. Okay, so if input nums, and now I'm going to off screen here see if Python has a contains function. I in input nums, and we're going to test this by doing print I, and we will run that, and whoops, and see. So 0, 1, 5, 7, 27. I actually didn't know that about Python syntax. I'm learning stuff already. Great. Okay, so this means we would just do missing nums. I think we could actually use plus, well, dot append I. I think that will work. It's actually been a while since I coded in Python. And let's print missing nums. Yep, that worked. That has all the same numbers we have. Oh wait, I'm sorry. If, yeah, I'm a fool. If do this, we will pass, and else we will do. I don't know if I could invert this conditional with that syntax or not, but this might work. That contains all the wrong numbers, which is great. So now we just need to reduce it down to its number ranges. This is going to require some strangeness, I think, with types, right? Because you can't represent a number range as an integer, even though we have been keeping these as integers. So probably everything is going to need to be a string, even the single numbers. So for example, in our output for the input we're dealing with right now, right here, 6 is still by itself. So even that is going to need to be a string. So I think what probably makes the most sense, so in my mind, the first thing that I jump to is actually a class system, which is probably way over engineering it, and we're not going to do it. But if you could have a class called missing chunk that had a list of numbers that are missing and in a sequence, and then that class had a method to look at its list of numbers that it contains and spits out it as a string, hyphenated string with the first and the last. First, a dash, and then the last. That is not going to cut it for us, because, or it will, but I think it's going to be way too much coding, and probably a simpler way to do it might be to actually just loop through all the numbers 1 through 100 again. Or maybe we can, so, okay, let's do this. Let's call it, I like that, calling it missing chunks, because some of it's ranging and some of it isn't. And that'll be that. And then we are going to say for I in range 0 length of, actually I think you don't need the 0, right? Yeah, I can just, wrong. Python, and if I just say like range 10, yeah. Okay, so we can actually shorthand this a little bit. Not bad. And I'm gonna probably review this for efficiency later, but what's that? Get that out of there. Don't need to worry about it now. So, length missing nums. Okay, cool. So, this is going to go through every number and missing number. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, first of all, if the length of missing chunks is equals 0. So if it's empty, then what we're going to want to do for this is actually just like sort of begin with the new chunks. So we're going to say, and actually missing numbers in this case, for what I'm going to do, probably might make sense as a queue, but we're just going to, because it's Python and we can just use lists, we're just going to use lists. And we're going to say missing chunks dot append, and we're going to do a string, well, yep, we're going to do it a string, and we're going to say append on a string plus the missing nums, the first number missing nums. Okay, so let's just put a call to print the missing chunks here, and we can sort of track what this looks like. Okay. Alright, I forget how to cast. Okay, turns out my problem was with a close parentheses. So I found that just was missing one. Okay, so yep, that does exactly what I thought it was going to do. So now, inside of this, so if the length is 0, then we'll do that. Otherwise, we're going to continue on. So we are going to have, so the first number is just going to be added in there as a string. Now, I want to get the last string in the list. So we're going to say last chunk equals missing chunks dot the length of missing actually I think you can just do -1 to get the last in Python. And okay, so now we have the final chunk at the end. So what I'm going to do now, and I think I've blabbered on for a while, and I'll just sort of verbally explain it and then come back when it's done, is I'm going to actually just check to see if there's a hyphen already in that. And if there is, that means it is a number range already. And if not, then that means that it's just a single number, like 6 is here. If it's a single number, I'm going to see if the current thing in the loop, is 1 larger than that. And if it is, I'm going to add the hyphen and the number. Okay? If there already is a hyphen, I'm going to ask for just the number after the hyphen, and I have to parse that into an integer again, and then see if the current number is one larger than that number. And if it is, I'll just replace the string, the after the hyphen part of the string with the other number. Now, I could do this with indices of the string, but that's going to cause a problem because some of these numbers are 2 digits long. Some of them are 1 digit long. For example, 6 is 1 digit and 28 is 2 digits. So I can't do it based on string length alone. I have to do it based on the actual location and splitting it at the hyphen. Okay, we're really close, but I did make a couple of errors, and I'm going to bring you guys in for the last home stretch here. Okay, so let's review what we have. So we have the ability to create the missing numbers. You can rewind if you want a review of that. We have the starting out of finding the missing chunks, and again, a chunk is what I'm calling an element in our output list, essentially. So either it's going to be a single missing number, or it's going to be a range of numbers that are inside of the missing numbers. So, that is basically kicked off by saying on the first, we're going to loop through all of our missing numbers, and the first missing number we look through is just going to be added to the missing chunks as a string of the number casted. Otherwise, we're going to get so every other iteration, every other missing number, aside from that first one, which just gets kind of thrown in, everything else is going to go through this, is going to go through this chunk of logic. Okay? So, the most recent chunk is found. So whatever the last thing inside of missing chunks is. Then we determine if it's a range or not. And basically, we just determine that if there's a hyphen in it. If there's a hyphen in it, we're dealing with a range of numbers. Otherwise, it's just a singular number. And if it is a range, then, I really did something here. What did I call this? I called this last chunk split. So basically, I split it into its 2 strings at the hyphen, and in Python, split removes that hyphen. So if you from the string, so it basically get left with 2 strings of either number, and then I take the most recent one and I cast that into an int. So that we know what number it is, and we determine if I, also known as the current missing number that we're looking at, is 1 larger than that most recent number we've looked at. If it is, then we do a little thing. It's a little cut off here, so let me scroll. We basically just take the most recent missing chunks and replace it with a casted string of what came first in that chunk that we saved from when we split it up above, a hyphen, and the current missing number we're looking at. Very simple. Otherwise, if it's not a 1 larger, so if it's not the next sequential number, or not part of the current range of missing numbers, we don't go back and change the most recent missing chunk, or the last element in missing chunks. We append it as a string, right? So basically, you can imagine us going through each of the items in missing numbers and sort of continuously, if it's 1 larger than the last missing number, we're just sort of lopping it into that thing in missing chunks. And if it's not, then we're moving on to the next missing chunk and lopping it in again. That's kind of what we're doing. And let me show you what happens when I run this. I'm sorry, I had a print statement in here, didn't I? Oh, no, I didn't save it after removing the... Sorry. Oh, boy. Okay. It's so close, and this will be a little mistake, right? So we have 2-4, great. 6-26, whoa, that's wrong. 28-53, great. 57-99, great. So what happened? It happens in this else statement. Now, in my mind, I said, if if you have a singular number, like 6, and then it's got no hyphen in it, so it's not a range, then the next number you have is just probably going to be the second half of the range, right? Just add the hyphen and the number. That was happened in my logic, but I didn't think it through completely, because what if you have that special case that luckily our example input-output had. Otherwise, I wouldn't have caught this error. In that if there is a single number that isn't going to be condensed down into a range, you need to actually check for that. So if so this will be the case if it is correctly the next number. So basically, we would want, we can make let's create another variable called recent num. Let's say it's going to be an integer of last chunk, and it's not going to be, we don't split the chunk because it's just a string of a single number. So then we can use this same logic here. If recent num is that, then we would want to use a hyphen. Otherwise, we would not want to use a hyphen. We would want to just do missing chunks append string I again. So I'm always a little worried when I end up having an opportunity to copy and paste such a large chunk of code. Could that be a utility function written somewhere else? Could that be condensed into something where there isn't so much redundancy? But this is so simple. This is just such a little conditional here, and there is some differences because this is this recent num here is not a list coming from a list. It's coming from a string. So, anyways, let's run it again. We have an error, invalid syntax at else because I forgot the colon. And let's run it again. And we now have the correct things. It's not exact, right? Because we have our brackets and there's a quotate marks. So I would ask, is it fine if the syntax is different? I'm guessing it's going to be fine because the information is there. And then you kind of start going through this second round of investigation in your answer, which kind of includes questions like, how scalable is it? Now here, so basically, if the list of input numbers was bigger and bigger and bigger, would this still run efficiently? The answer here is yes, because there's a maximum number of elements that could be here, and that would be 100, which could include every number of 0 to 99. And if it did, then the output would kind of be nothing. Let's actually figure out input nums equals range range 99. Just take that one out in the comments. Run it again. We get 99. Oh, that's actually exactly what you would expect to happen. So if I ran this with everything from 0 to 100, we get an empty list. Seems exactly right because there is nothing missing. If we comment this out, these are just some special cases to make sure that the algorithm takes everything into account. If we pass it an empty list, it returns 0-99, and that's exactly what it should return. I would guess, it doesn't say here, but I think that's good enough. Now, if we were incorrect about these assumptions, that there are repeated numbers, that would not affect the behavior, because it would affect the behavior of our solution here, but it would not affect. They would probably have to specify what happens if there's a duplicate. I don't know. That could complicate things because you'd have to know if you came across. Also, if the numbers weren't in order. So if you came across, the order thing isn't too big of a deal because you could just call sort in Python, and if you were using an array list or whatever in Java or something like that, you would be able to just sort it. Because the order in which they come in actually doesn't matter. You're still going to want the same output. So I won't include that in our answer. But then the question is, if there's duplicates, you would need to know. Essentially, I think it would involve another conditional here, checking to see if the number is equal to the most recent number. And that should fix your problem. But I don't think we need to go into that because I doubt that would be a twist they would throw at you. But so scalable, there isn't really much scalability for this. Now, other problems that deal with, like, date, lists of dates or lists of numbers that aren't between a range, you would probably want to think about what's going to happen to the efficiency of your program as things went up. We are lucky. We don't have to deal with that. If someone asked me, what is the efficiency? the thing you just wrote, or should you improve the efficiency of what you just wrote? I would say, probably not, because it only needs to loop. It needs to loop 100 times to start, which is fine. That's just a constant. And then from there, it basically, the larger the input list, the fewer times this whole chunk has to loop, right? Because it's everything that isn't part of, it's all the missing numbers. So the more numbers you have in there, the fewer it has to run. So basically, because this constraint is set to 100, the maximum number of times it's going to have to run is 100, always. And that's not very much, so I wouldn't really bother too much about the efficiency. The one question I would have is maybe if we could eliminate having these two loops, if there was some way we could skip the part about generating the missing numbers and then just loop through the numbers we have and somehow infer what's missing from there. It's not obvious to me. Maybe it's obvious to you. Please put it down below in the description in some form or another. That is pretty much all I got for you. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you found it helpful. I'm going to be tackling harder problems, easier problems. Again, if you want different languages, put them down below. I can make it happen. I'll try to stick to the ones that are most popular. Python, C#, Java, etc. Maybe JavaScript as well. And that's all I got for you. So I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.